Let me tell you this story, folks. It's about a guy named Jan, and it begins when he was 16, growing up in a rural village outside of Kiev, Ukraine. And as he told Forbes recently, this was not the greatest place or time to be Jewish.
This is what's interesting about Silicon Valley. There are failures and there are successes. And for these guys who are now obviously billionaires, this was a huge success.
Imagine arriving in America as a teenager with your mother. You have very little money. You are trying to learn a new language. You are starting a completely new life, and you have no idea that one day you will create a company worth billions of dollars. This is the story of Jan Koum, the man who would go on to create WhatsApp. But his story did not begin in Silicon Valley. It began in Ukraine. Jan Koum was born in 1976 in what was then the Soviet Union. He grew up in a small village near Kiev. His family did not live a luxurious life. His father worked in construction. His mother worked hard to support the family. Life was difficult. And there was another problem. The Soviet government had a powerful presence in everyday life. Privacy was not something people could take for granted. Koum later explained that his experiences growing up influenced his strong belief in privacy and freedom. Then everything changed. When Jan was 16 years old, he and his mother moved to the United States. They arrived in California hoping for a better future, but America was not immediately easy. They had limited money. Jan had to adapt to a completely different culture. He also had to learn English. His family depended on government assistance. There were moments when simply paying for food was difficult. Jan eventually took a job, cleaning floors at a grocery store. At the same time, he became fascinated by computers. He wanted to understand how they worked, but he did not have an expensive education or a wealthy family supporting him. So he taught himself. He bought used computer networking books. He studied programming. He practiced. He made mistakes, and he kept learning. This became one of the most important patterns in his life. He did not wait for perfect conditions. He worked with what he had. Eventually, his technical skills became strong enough to open new doors. Jan studied at San Jose State University, but he did not stay there until graduation. He was more interested in working with technology in the real world. His career eventually brought him to Yahoo. And this is where another important person entered his life. Brian Acton. Acton was also an engineer at Yahoo. The two men became friends. They worked together. They understood technology, and more importantly, they understood each other. After spending years at Yahoo, they eventually decided to leave. Both men even applied for jobs at Facebook, and both were rejected. At the time, that rejection probably felt like a setback. But sometimes rejection is simply a different direction. Because Jan Koum was about to create something much bigger. In 2009, the smartphone revolution was beginning to change the world. The iPhone App Store had created a new opportunity. People were downloading applications directly onto their phones. Koum saw the potential. He purchased an iPhone, and he began thinking about what kind of application people might actually need. His first idea was not exactly the WhatsApp we know today. He wanted to create an application that allowed people to show their status. It was a simple idea, but the first version was not a huge success. This could have been the end, but instead, Koum noticed something important. People wanted to communicate, and smartphones were becoming a powerful communication tool. So the idea changed. WhatsApp began moving toward messaging, and suddenly, everything started to make sense. The goal was not to create another complicated social network. The goal was simple. Let people communicate easily. WhatsApp was designed around simplicity. There were no games. There was no complicated interface. There was no huge advertising machine. There was simply messaging, and that simplicity became one of its greatest strengths. Koum also cared deeply about privacy. His childhood experiences had taught him that private communication matters. He wanted WhatsApp to be a place where people could communicate without feeling like everything they did was being watched. The company grew slowly at first, but something special was happening. People were telling their friends about it. Then those friends were telling other people. The growth became increasingly powerful. WhatsApp did not need a massive advertising campaign to convince everyone to use it. The product itself became the marketing. One person downloaded WhatsApp, then another, then another. Soon entire communities were using it. People used it to communicate with friends. They used it to talk to family members in other countries. They used it instead of traditional text messages, and international communication became much easier. Koum understood something very important. A great product does not always need to be complicated. Sometimes the best product is the one that solves one problem extremely well. WhatsApp continued growing, and the company remained remarkably focused. While other technology companies were spending huge amounts of money on marketing, WhatsApp focused on building the product. While other companies were trying to capture attention with advertisements, WhatsApp focused on communication. And while many startups were trying to add more and more features, WhatsApp tried to remain simple. The strategy worked. By early 2014, WhatsApp had reached hundreds of millions of monthly users. The company was growing at an extraordinary speed. More than 1 million new registered users were being added each day, according to Facebook when it announced the acquisition. And then something happened that changed the technology industry. Mark Zuckerberg wanted WhatsApp. Facebook announced that it had reached an agreement to acquire WhatsApp. The headline number shocked the world. The deal was worth approximately $19 billion when including cash stock and restricted stock units. Suddenly, the young immigrant who once depended on food stamps had built one of the most valuable technology companies in the world. But there is a detail about the acquisition that makes the story even more powerful. Jan Koum signed the agreement near the welfare office, where he and his mother had once gone to collect food stamps. Think about that moment. Years earlier, he had stood there because his family needed help. Now he was returning to that same place to sign a deal worth billions. The story was no longer about poverty. It was about what he had built despite poverty. WhatsApp continued operating after the acquisition. Koum remained involved. He joined the Facebook board, but the relationship eventually became complicated. Koum had always cared deeply about privacy. He had also resisted advertising on WhatsApp. Over time, disagreements developed between the WhatsApp leadership and Facebook over issues including privacy data and monetization. Brian Acton left WhatsApp in 2017. Then in 2018, Jan Koum announced that he was leaving Facebook and WhatsApp. His departure marked the end of an important chapter, but his story was already extraordinary. A teenager arrives in America. He struggles financially. He learns computer programming, largely through self-education. He works at Yahoo. He meets Brian Acton. He gets rejected by Facebook. He creates a simple messaging application. That application becomes a global phenomenon, and eventually Facebook buys it for billions of dollars. But perhaps the biggest lesson from Jan Koum's story has nothing to do with money. It is about simplicity. Jan Koum did not try to build everything. He focused on one problem: communication. He built a product that people understood immediately. He also stayed patient. WhatsApp was not an overnight success. It took years of work. There were moments when the idea looked uncertain. There were moments when the company could have failed, but Koum continued. His story also teaches another lesson. Your starting point does not determine your final destination. Jan Koum started with very little. He did not come from a wealthy Silicon Valley family. He did not have a massive team. He did not have unlimited resources. He had curiosity. He had technical skills. He had a friend and business partner, and he had an idea. Sometimes that is enough to begin. Today, WhatsApp has become one of the most important communication platforms in the world. And behind that enormous company is a story that started with a teenager trying to build a better future for himself and his mother. Jan Koums' journey reminds us that success does not always begin with money. Sometimes it begins with learning. Sometimes it begins with failure. Sometimes it begins with rejection. And sometimes it begins with simply refusing to give up. The next time you open WhatsApp and send a message to someone thousands of miles away, remember that this simple action is connected to an incredible story. A story about an immigrant, a programmer, an entrepreneur, and a man who went from struggling to afford food to building one of the most valuable startups in history. His name is Jan Koum. And this is the incredible journey behind WhatsApp.